Hello, everybody. Welcome to GCRE TV. Today, the mobile home show with Glenn. We're going to be speaking about the first steps for buyers once they have their premises under contract. It's going to be a great show today, as always. Speaking with Glenn. So let's just introduce him. Go ahead and introduce him to the call. Hey, Glenn, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Gavin. Just watching this political stuff, trying to figure out who our president's going to be.
Yes.
It's crazy here, but I'm doing great. Life, it's beautiful outside and, getting ready
Yeah.
for the rest of this year and excited to have another show with our guys here today and talk to you guys about, what to do once you finally get your park under contract, if you're a
Yeah.
buyer. Obviously the steps are different if you're a seller, and we'll get to that probably in another episode.
Yeah.
But it should be a good show.
Okay, cool. Well, Glenn, I will hand over the show to you now, and I'll come back to you towards the end when we have some questions again.
Great. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me again. I'm Glenn. This is the Mobile Home Park Show. We're going to talk today, as I was just saying, about, appropriate next steps once you get a park under contract, because you definitely don't just sit there and wait. It's the clock's ticking. So typically, if you followed sort of the progression of how we, gone through the previous episodes to where we are now, and there's some big jumps that went along the way, agreed. But that's, you've databased all the parks, you found a few things, you've worked with brokers, you've worked directly with sellers, you've been making offers that, hopefully were competitive, and finally you get one that's under contract, and now you're saying to yourself, oh, now what? Well, what the now what part is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of really great due diligence lists out there. You can probably download off the internet. If you're working with a broker, they should be able to give you some pointers and guidance on that. And so, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty about every single thing that you need to do as your next steps. We don't have time for it, then you'll be bored to death. But let's go through some of the highlights and kind of discuss the more important stuff that I want you guys to pay real close attention to. So your park has finally gone under contract, and you've submitted your contract. Hopefully within your contract, you've given some expressed items of what you need for your due diligence to even start from the books and records. If you haven't, well, next time make sure you put some timelines in there about how long the seller has to deliver their due diligence request, to you. So if it isn't there, you as a buyer might have done that strategically so you can keep buying more time on a contract, which is, not a bad strategy as a buyer. It will drive your broker crazy. It's going to drive your seller crazy. And, it's going to probably create some fussiness along the timeline. But ultimately, you may be able to buy more time that way. And what that means is when you send over your due diligence request, which is you're doing it essentially with your contract or with an immediate follow-up, with an addendum or something, or sometimes just by an email request. And you're going to be asking for things like, 2 to 3 years, bank records, 2 to 3 years tax returns, 2 to 3 years of utility statements and rent rolls and leases and, all these kind of things that are your typical due diligence requests. Most of the time, our contracts, at least my contracts and most of the other commercial brokers' contracts, are going to give the seller 3 to 5 days to deliver that to you. And oftentimes, we're going to deliver all of it upon execution of the contract, or at least what's in our files that the seller has available. The seller might not ever have everything you want, and he's going to send you back a notice saying, hey, I don't have this thing, I don't have that thing. Take it or leave it, kill the contract, or let's move forward. And you're going to have to decide, accordingly for each of those. Assuming here in this discussion that, the seller has bank records to deliver you. And what you want to do is tie them back to the rent rolls and make sure all the money's adding up, look upon P&Ls that's being submitted, make sure that money's adding up to what these bank records are showing the deposits are. I don't worry so much about the expenses on the bank statements, the payouts. I worry more about the revenue coming in. And then I go through things like the utility bills, and, property taxes, their insurance statement, all the general expenses that we're going to have on there, and making sure those all add up to the appropriate amount of expenses that you're buying this park under the assumption of. Assuming that all checks out, most of the time it kind of will. You have pluses or minuses. Repairs and maintenance is going to probably be all over the place, and you're going to just have to learn how to carve that out. But that's not the only stuff you got to do during, from when you go under contract. That's often the first thing you're focusing on. You try to get through all the paper side of it in the first week or two, because you probably have, somewhere between 30 and 60, maybe 90 days in your due diligence. Most contracts that we do are between 30 and 60 days for the due diligence side. So that's a very limited window. And you still have a lot of other things to order, things like your environmental, your phase 1 environmental study, which is, giving you kind of guidance on the condition of the grounds themselves from any pollutants that might be in there, any environmental hazards that, could pose a liability risk to you, that might make bank funding impossible, might make your insurance, skyrocket and things like that. So you're going through, and those with the phase 1, you got to get on the phone or call your broker and ask for a referral and find the right phase 1 company to use. But they're pretty inexpensive. A few $1,000 usually gets it done for a phase 1. But they can often take 3 to 4 weeks. Sometimes as quick as 2 weeks. But more often than not, you're going to see it, especially towards the end of the year as more transactions are happening, you're going to see that timeline can easily be 4 weeks to get that environmental return to you. So, and you might not want to order the environmental necessarily on your own, although most of the time it's fine. If you're getting bank financing, you might want to ask them if they're going to have to require their own phase 1 to be done. Just like they're probably going to do their own appraisal. So you might not want to order one right out the gate, because appraisals, just like environmental studies, can also take 2 to 4 weeks. Oftentimes they come in on time, but at the end of the year, things take longer. So you're paying attention to the clock against your kind of third-party studies. And I would have suggested during your contract that you wrote in there a special carve-out for an extension specifically for third-party vendor, studies, like the environmental and the appraisal and stuff like that. Surveys being one that you probably do need to order or at least get going if there isn't a current survey to update. A lot of these older mom and pop parks won't have a survey, or the survey's so old that it's not going to be accepted by the bank or whatever. And those guys could easily take 4 to 6 weeks to get done too. So you want to be very cognizant of this during your day 1 stuff, and kind of create your own timeline chart of all the different studies that need to be done, all the different vendors that need to be contacted, and the timelines arranging with them, so you are able to stay on track. Because it will offend everybody in the deal if you ask for more time because you were just slow to get things going. You have to prepare for your on-site visit. You're going to want to do, in my opinion, more than one on-site visit. We typically like it best when a buyer has been to the park before accepting a contract, and that could give you a competitive advantage over the other people that are offering on the deal too. But that's not your physical site inspection, or inspection. That's just you saying, hey, I know what I'm looking at. I'm seeing what's here, and I'll dig in deeper if my contract's accepted. So when you get the contract accepted and you go back, I really suggest spending a lot of time there, okay? Almost an obnoxious amount of time, not necessarily at the park, but in the region and, in the municipality, and getting to know your property manager if you're allowed to talk to them. Sometimes you might not be allowed to talk to them until the money's gone hard, but you're going to want to interview other property managers in the event that property manager isn't sticking around. You're going to want to talk to, the local vendors. You want to try and figure out how you're going to handle the maintenance crew, the off-site management aspect of it, the municipality aspect of it. You're going to want to go down there and have a discussion with them, explain to them, yet again, if you didn't do this in the beginning like we advised, that now you're going back down there and explaining again what your hopes and plans are for this park and how you plan on improving, the location and building more community and doing all that kind of stuff, and talking with them, seeing what's coming down their pipeline, seeing, how that's going to affect, your ownership when you take over. Are there any big taxes coming down? Are there any, is your park getting annexed into the city? Is there city sewer that you're going to be forced to hook up to? Are there, a reassessment coming that maybe, is unexpected, or is there an additional tax that's coming on that's, that was just voted on that you didn't know about when you put it under contract? You're going to want to ask them all these kind of little tidbits of things and keep good notes, because that's part of your due diligence here. And frankly, I would say that's on the higher level of important stuff, is what's happening with the municipality. I would get to know your police department, go in and say hi to them and talk with them about, hey, is there any problem child over there that I should be aware of? Are you regularly coming out to that park? Have you seen an increase or a decline in criminal activity happening there, or having to be called out to there? And I would really, go through and do your tenant inspections too, with your estoppel letters. But most of the time, if you say estoppel letters, they're going to look at you like you're a communist or something. You want to, let them know that, hey, I'm just verifying your rent. Can you sign off on this note? Again, a lot of times you can't do that until towards the end of due diligence, because most of the time the sellers don't want you to scare off their tenants with the idea of a sale happening. But when you are authorized to go speak with the tenants, you're going to want to get that estoppel letter, and it's going to verify how long they've been there, what rent they're paying, if there's any concessions, if they have a deposit, when their move out date is, all that kind of stuff. So your bank can get more comfortable that this is real income that's coming in and it's been verified and stuff. You're also going to want to talk to your water and sewer inspector people. Now, most towns, you're not going to be able to find a good leak detection company out there, or a sewer person that has a camera that can run a camera down the lines to inspect, if the lines are in good shape and stuff. So you're going to want to look pretty hard for that. If you can't find one of those guys in that town, and there's no other town nearby to get somebody to come in and do it, you're kind of be reliant on the local people and getting their thoughts. Have you been out to this park before? Have you had to do repairs at this park before? In your books and records under the R&M side of things, if the owner has good notes, there should be what his, water and sewer vendors are, and you can just call them up and have them come out and tell you the real deal. Give them a few bucks for it, get them to tell you what they've had to do. And if you still can't do that, then, you might have to go down to the city and talk to the municipality and go check on what permits have been pulled to do septic or sewer repairs, or well or public water repairs and things like that. You're definitely going to want to pull the permit records anyways, just to see what's been going on over there. You're absolutely going to want to check on the zoning and making sure that you're correctly zoned, and don't just take the word for it. Oh, we're grandfathered, because that could mean a lot of things, and it could change like that. And a grandfather might only be specific to the exact way it's being run now. And if a home burns down and you're like, oh, I'm bringing in a beautiful home now to replace it, that might trigger a bunch of setbacks and totally ruin your day. So you want to not just take the surface answer on a lot of the questions, and you're going to want to keep digging and digging and digging until you have a very comprehensive review of these things. Now, again, I can't stress enough, you're going to need to review these financials, and I don't want to make that sound like a smaller aspect of this, but when I'm looking at something, I'm starting really with the management side of stuff and understanding my tenant base. I'm trying to work with the municipality and really understand what they're all about and what they're seeing coming down. And I'm working with my bank, because along the whole timeline, you may have written in, an extension for, financing, which you should do, really. If it's not a competitive offering, you might, be able to get away with it. If it's a very competitive offering, you might not be able to get away with it. But you should have, some deep discussions with your banks. And a lot of these banks, especially these community banks, they'll say, yeah, we'll loan on that, no problem. And then, by the time it goes to committee, they're actually not going to pull the trigger for one reason or another. Maybe the approval process, guys that are doing it, they say, no, we don't like mobile home parks. And then you just wasted a few months. Now you have to go back to the seller and beg for, some forgiveness on this and get some more time. I would really recommend, probably calling 20 or 25 banks before accepting who you're going to do it with. I mean, every time you make an application, it's going to cost you a few bucks, sometimes a lot of bucks. So you really want to make sure that who you're going with at the final time is the guy that can actually get it done. Because I hear it all the time. Oh, my bank said, it's not going to be a problem. And I said, I've never heard of this bank closing deals before, for mobile home parks. And, I would ask them, I'd go back to them and say, hey, have you ever closed a mobile home park this year? Or when was the last time you closed a mobile home park? And because oftentimes the answer is, well, yeah, we can do it, but we never have actually done it, which is a big indicator that they're not going to get to the finish line. And I would keep calling on that list until you have some good banks. Oftentimes your broker will know a few banks that would be good, and they're usually more than happy to help you get in touch with them, because they'll get a referral fee and all that kind of stuff. But most of the time the bank side of the business is going to fall on you, and it's a bear to get financing. And you're going to want to not put yourself in a box. You're going to want to give yourself as many options as you can. Community banks are really good resources. They do tend to have a higher interest rate, but they also tend to have a lower down payment. And oftentimes a longer amortization. But if you can get agency on your deal, or if you're thinking CMBS or something, you can often find very competitive, better interest rates and maybe a better long-term structure for you in there as well. And there's some amazing mobile home park brokers that can absolutely help you with those guys. The local stuff gets a little bit more confusing. So, kind of going back, you're looking at the books and records, you're talking to municipality, you're interviewing the managers and the tenants, you're talking with your bank. Getting through those four things sounds easy enough, but that's going to take every last minute of those 30 to 60 days that you're doing, especially with the on-site visits, which I would really recommend going more than once. Going there for a few days at a time, understanding the day and nights, what the park is like, during midday, and what the park is like at midnight. And kind of seeing the variety of characters that come in and out of that place, and understanding the municipality, understanding the local area. Spend some time, ask around town, what have you heard about this park? Is there, anything that you know about this that we think of the municipality? What do you think of them and how they act? And you just want to go through all this stuff. I didn't do it on my first thing, and I totally regretted it. I mean, I totally had a pain in the butt of a time. Because I didn't sit there and get to know my local community that I was investing in, and I didn't even try to get to know the municipality, and they try to stick it to me every day of the week. So you don't want to go down that path, in my opinion. I would really get comfortable interviewing third-party managers. Take a lot of that responsibility off of yourself, and go find a good on-site manager and a good off-site manager. Sometimes it's the same company, sometimes it's different, and get to know those guys, because you don't want to be fielding all the calls day in and day out once you do take ownership. And you want to make sure you're getting somebody that's licensed or extremely reputable for our industry to help you with these matters. It's going to cost you money, but it's going to be, if it was a well underwritten park, that should already be built into it. And if you're doing it on your own, time value headache. I think you're going to find, even if you pay 10% for your managers, that's still going to relieve a lot of headaches for you. Some other due diligence steps to kind of pay attention to, beyond some of the finer line items. I'll restate again. You survey the phase one. You want to get your insurance quotes. You want to make sure you're dealing with the banks. Appraisal or the bank may order, so you want to coordinate that, make sure that that's not going to be the reason for a delay. And then your third party vendors, like I was saying before, you want to go through and the water people and whatever, sewer people, whatever other activities and line items on there that can be verified by a third party is preferred, because you don't want to necessarily take the broker's word for it. You don't necessarily want to take the seller's word for it. You want to hear what the seller and what the broker have to say, but at the end of the day, you got to verify all this stuff yourself. They're incentivized and monetized to get this deal done, whereas it's your actual investment. So you want to make sure you're going through and crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. Past that, I would really recommend just giving us a call, or calling your broker, or calling. There are some offsite due diligence parties that can could do the majority of your due diligence for you. But again, I would still want to verify what they're doing and making sure that, they're really covering all your bases, and, that they're familiar with the mobile home communities, industry, and, stuff like that. Get a property condition report, and, a lot of the typical stereotypical things you do for most of the other stuff. But specifically for ours, you want to get into the nitty gritty on the utilities, on the tenants, on the municipality. That's probably most of that in a nutshell.
Glenn, thanks for that. As always, it's enlightening hearing you speak, because you bring so much knowledge and so much years of experience that, sometimes people don't actually, I wouldn't say they don't think about, but they overlook it sometimes, and all the craziness and madness that is happening in the whole process.
I mean, a lot of times guys just say, well, hey, the rent is $100,000 a year, the expenses are $40,000 a year. What else do I, what more do I really need to know? That kind of checks out. And I'm just, looking off the rent roll and looking off the, the bank statements. And you can't expect, a lot of these parks for the bank statements to match, and, and the rent rolls to match the bank statements to match the, the IRS forms. Because oftentimes they don't, the bank statements that he's giving you, it might be a commingled account, and the tax forms that he's giving you, for all he's got a real clever accountant that's, is moving things around, and it doesn't necessarily add up to apples on how the operation side is. And so you have to really get into the nitty gritty. I personally prefer to see those crazy long, P&Ls that have every GL code known to man. But oftentimes when you do a mom and pop deal, they give you 5 things: taxes, insurance, utilities, R&M, and, other, and you're like, 5 expenses to cover the whole gamut. And you need to dig into that and really kind of understand. But that falls on you to run your own budget on there based off of, the utility bills, and getting real granular with all that kind of stuff. Calling the municipality and asking about where the taxes are going to go, and, all that kind of stuff. Because a lot of these mom and pops, they live on this money, and they commingle these accounts. And it doesn't mean their money's wrong. It just means it's going to be hard as heck to verify, and the bank's going to give you a hard time about it. So you got to go through the extra steps of being able to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, so I just wanted to go over a couple of the things that you mentioned. And I think this topic really of conversation today is all about due diligence. Again, more due diligence, just to make sure it's okay. So things like your utilities, your rent charges, your taxes, etc. You spoke about. So I'll cover some of the stuff. You said usually once you start with the due diligence, the next steps you want to get into is phase 1. And ask your broker for a referral of a company that can help with that. And then expect about 4 weeks for them to get back to you. It's not a quick process.
3 to 4 weeks, best case 2 weeks, but somewhere in that range. Same with, the surveys, and same, with a lot of these other third parties. They take a minute. And they cost a few bucks, sometimes more than. And so you just got to make sure when you're writing your contract that you kind of have an idea already who you're going to for that stuff. Because if you're thinking, oh, I'll just get this guy on the phone today and he'll come out tomorrow, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work.
Definitely. And you've also mentioned, and I don't know how many people would probably do this, but do more than 2 or 3 site visits. Try to get a view of it in the night, in the day, in the evenings, kind of see what's going on, what's happening, get a real feel for it.
The weekdays, the weekends, kind of understand what a Friday night and Saturday night looks like at that park. It's going to tell you a lot about, the kind of pain in the butt you might have to deal with, you also want to make sure you're going there during the daytime and seeing how many of these cars are no longer at their homes because they went to work. I mean, if everybody's parking lot's still full, maybe there's no problem, but maybe it means that, maybe there's a problem, So you just kind of want to get some basic ideas of that.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I actually didn't think about that. A Friday or a Saturday, a weekend would always give you a good picture of what somebody's home or an area like that is going to be like. You're bound to see something. If it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong then. Usually,
because a lot of the tenants live paycheck to paycheck. They like to party after they get their Friday paycheck. I used to have to get to my parks by Friday at like 5:05, or that money was spent if I got there at 5:30. And my tenants, may not have been as sober as I would have preferred. It's a lot harder to get your collections done if you're a hands-on operator like I was.
Yeah.
If you don't understand these things, because I didn't even think nothing about it before I bought the park. I didn't realize that that's the kind of tenant base that I had. So you just want to you don't want to know that. You don't want to have this as a surprise, and then you get, oh man, this is what wasn't what I signed up for.
Yeah, definitely. And you said to talk to like the various places and people. So, for example, the government offices, the city council, as you guys would call it, management companies who are dealing with it, the site managers, the police as well, to get a really good picture back on everything to make sure all the dots and I's are crossed and T's. So but that's always a good one. I always think the relevant authorities is a good place to start when doing any due diligence to make sure that you're on the right path, really.
Yeah, and you're going to see also in a lot of parks, I did mention this, so I want to bring it up now, is you'll see in a lot of parks, especially the lower end stuff, that the rents for some of the tenants are being subsidized, either by an organization like a nonprofit or something nearby, or maybe by a church or something like that for a few months because, a tenant hit a hard time, or maybe they're just getting up and running finally. And you want to go know this up front, or maybe there's a Lonnie dealer in your park, which we haven't even talked about at all, but it's like subletting your lots to somebody else to bring homes in and rent them. And you want to go interview that guy. You want to go talk to the people that are subsidizing the rent, understand, how that all works, just to have a more comprehensive view. I mean, it's probably not going to kill your deal for you if you didn't do it. But at the same time, there's plenty of parks that are getting, rents from one company that's paying 6 or 7 rents at the park. Well, you just want to go make sure that guy's pretty stable and not going to all of a sudden leave you hanging with 6 or 7 tenants in the park that have no ability to pay. You just want to work through these things, and this is all going to get uncovered during a very kind of heavy questioning of every line item, including the tenants and the rents and the expenses and the this and the that of every single thing that, you don't know what you don't know. So by just going with it with that attitude, starting at A and asking every single thing about A, and then going to B, anything that comes to mind, uncover, keep digging and uncover. You're not looking, you're paying attention to hear if you see lies and red flags, but you're not trying to catch the guy or the person in a lie or anything. You're just trying to get their understanding of every single thing that you can. And then you're going to go double check that against your own stuff. Yeah,
no, that's true. And it's one thing that you mentioned that was quite interesting. You said be careful when speaking to the tenants because you don't want to spook them. Because that could easily happen, I would imagine. How often does that happen? Oh, it does.
Yeah, it does all the time. It like tenants get real pissy, and then they start yelling at the seller, and they threaten to move out. And oh, I'm moving because this thing's getting sold. And most of the time, it doesn't pencil out. Most of the time, it's just a fit that somebody's throwing. But it's definitely going to aggravate the heck out of everybody involved in the deal.
Yeah.
And most of the time, like if I'm doing a deal, oftentimes I'm not letting a buyer inspect the park-owned homes until the last week of their due diligence, after they've checked off everything else.
Yes,
and I know that we got a deal before I go and especially with COVID right now, invade a home with a buyer who he has to go talk to these people at some point. But we're usually saving that towards the end and building that into the contract up front. Now, if I'm representing a buyer, maybe I'm not, trying to get my buyer to wait till the last second, and I'm trying to get him to have this stuff a little further up front. But, at the same time, you got to be conscious of this because as a buyer, you're not trying to jeopardize the seller either. You don't even know if you want this park yet, so you want to be cognizant of this whole type of stuff. And a lot of buyers are under the assumption that, they can do whatever the hell they want once they're under contract. And, I don't disagree, but I don't wholeheartedly agree to that. I like to see schedules of everything. And so as buyers work with us, we're asking them, when are you doing this? When are you doing this? We want a kind of a very clear timeline that we're negotiating up front. So that way, when that, when it does come up and we're like, you didn't tell us you're going to do this, we don't have to have that kind of conversation because it's just going to jeopardize your deal. And if it's a competitive park, there's another buyer waiting for you to mess up and ask for a little bit more than you should have asked, and hope the deal falls out so we can pick it up. So you just want to be cognizant of all these things.
Yeah, you also mentioned like utilities, the sewage lines and stuff. You want to make sure you want to check the history of that. That's another big due diligence point. You don't want to go in there and then.
You want to find out who owns those things first of all. If it's a public system, chances are, the park owner does, but more times than not, the city might own them, which is great for you. And maybe that was not accounted for in the pricing. That could be a real significant bump for, for your pricing when you go and resell, is if the city owns it. But then, at the same time, you want to ask them, well, what does that really mean that you own it? And, what happens if, there is a repair and it's under the road that you as the park owner might own? Who's paying for the road repair? You just want to ask them about, the very granular type of stuff. Maybe the city owns the roads and maybe they own the water lines and you don't have to think twice about it. Perfect, great. But not too often, not too often. There's usually something that's going to drive you crazy about the deal. Maybe you're on septic and, you don't, the park was built in the 60s or 70s. It's probably, you got some clay, some Orangeburg clay sewer pipes in there.
Yes.
But maybe the city has, some grants available that, the seller didn't even know about because he was afraid to go talk to the city about his park because he knows every time he goes down there, he gets yelled at about this, that, or the other. So you want to go find out. We just found a guy a grant for about $2 million in North Carolina on one of his parks to convert, the septic over to city sewer. That's a great benefit, I don't know why the previous guy didn't do it, but this is the kind of stuff as a buyer you can uncover and, it's going to help you maximize this investment. Now, maybe you find out there is no grants available and the lines are all Orangeburg clay and, you have the septic guy out there pumping tanks 5 times a week. That's a real red flag. And you want to know this. Maybe it's solvable, but, maybe it's not. You're going to want to check it, especially, the flood zone stuff, and make sure if you're buying a park that's got septic tanks and it's in a flood zone, that could be a real jeopardizing position to be in. But if you ask and didn't know to ask, you might just get stuck with that, So you want to find all that kind of stuff out. And the municipality would be a great resource for you. And the more you go and talk with them, the nicer they're going to be to you. And I really recommend bringing, something with you every time, whether it's some brownies or some muffins or something like that, because they're, they often are like very resistant to, be forthcoming on information that they tell you. They usually only answer your question exactly, and they don't give any, broader picture on it because they, it's just what they do. I don't know why, but that's what they do.
And the last thing you mentioned is review financials. Always check with a bank that have done deals financing mobile home parks, or even speak to your broker. They may very well be able to recommend a company that will a bank.
The deals are a lot easier to finance once they're over 50 lots and over $2 million. Okay, if they're and on private utility, on public utilities. So they're very easy to finance. If you know within our industry who to go to and stuff, those are much easier to finance. But if you're buying your first park that's $500,000 and it's on gravel roads and it's got private utilities and maybe it's 25 lots and half of them are park-owned homes, you're going to have a real hard time finding somebody to finance that park. And you're going to have to understand that before you make that offer, because you're probably going to waste a lot of time and money trying to finance that thing. So get your financing kind of upfront, start understanding before you're making offers, start databasing, banks. So that way, where to go to and understanding, who's doing what and who's got the higher probability of giving you a real quote and a real loan that's going to get, past approvals and into the finish line, and funded. Because that's real painful that when that's the reason the deal doesn't close. You'll sit there on, asking for extensions after extensions. You might be 180 days into the contract before everybody's just like, it's time to give up, man.
Yeah. I think often that's probably the first thing you should do is get approval first before you do the due diligence. But then you can't really get approval if you haven't done the due diligence. So it's a horse and cart scenario. You've got to be working both sides of it at the same time, I think.
And the underwriting, before you even wrote the offer, you should have already underwritten your park, not taking your broker's underwriting, not taking the seller's underwriting, use them as a comparison, but do your own underwriting. So you can at least kind of understand all this stuff. And then once you're going through due diligence, re-underwriting it again a couple more times, as new information's uncovered and kind of starting over and over again with it. It's not uncommon for us as brokers to re-underwrite a deal 5 or 10 times as things are becoming known. And you want to be able to do that and then sharing that information, with your bank. But at the same time, if you give your bank too much information, that could kill your deal too. So you kind of want to be, very aware of exactly what they need and why they need it. Because if you give them too much stuff, it'll confuse them or will jeopardize your deal sometimes.
Yeah. So a question just came up in my mind as you were saying that. Would your broker be able to do all this due diligence for you, or even though the broker does it, you have to do it as well?
Yeah, no, I'm not doing your due diligence for anybody. I don't want that liability, and that's 99% of the brokers out there. I mean, there's always a nice guy broker where happy to hold your hand and kind of say, hey, did you do this yet? Did you do that yet? But we don't want to take on the exposure of being responsible for your due diligence. You're the investor, you're the guy with all the money, or just the broker here trying to help somebody get from point A to point B.
Yes.
And that's not something you'll do. But there are due diligence companies out there that will do the majority of it for you, but they're few and far between for our MH industry.
Yes.
For apartments and industrial and single tenant net lease stuff, there's a pile of companies out there to do that for you. For the mobile home parks, in some of the bigger cities, you'll find somebody, a group that does it nationally. I can only think of maybe one group, and they don't always do it, in every city and on time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's really on you as the investor to have all this stuff ready to go, and while you're putting that all together, as you get more and more confident that hey, this is going to pass all my stuff for me, you got to be thinking about your team. You got to be thinking about who you're going to bring on your team to oversee everything on this. Who's your manager? Who's your maintenance man? Who's your back? If you got water that you got to test, who's your tester? Who's the backup water tester? All that kind of stuff. You want to make sure you have all these parts kind of put together and assembled, because once you close, it's all on you. There's usually not a transition period of holding everything the seller had, giving you a few months to get up and running. That usually doesn't exist in our business.
Okay, cool. All right, Glenn, well, that was a thank you for that today again, as always. That was a really good show. If you got any last words for them, or even contact details for how they could get hold of you when they're ready.
Yeah, guys, it's a scary process, but it's not that hard. And, we're here to, kind of point you in the right direction. But as I said, it's not the kind of thing any broker's really going to do for you. But most brokers will help point you in the right direction and give you some referrals on some of the stuff. But, if you're in a city that they haven't transacted in before, they might not have the right people, and you're going to have to put it on yourself. Our team's always here to help and give you kind of guidance. And if we can share a referral with you, we will. We're happy to talk to you anytime about any stage of property ownership, from acquisition to disposition. If you're a seller, everything I just said here, I hope you paid attention to, because you want to prepare your stuff in a way to take it for a buyer, so a buyer can look at it and actually, go with it, save you some time on the contract, give you a little additional pricing because you've got everything in order. But, there's caveats to all of it, and I really recommend having your accountant, your attorney, your advisor, your broker, your lender, all having kind of powwows with them and really understanding the process. We'll be happy to help whatever way we can. Okay,
and how would anybody get in contact with you if they were interested to speak to you again?
Absolutely. You can just go to our website. The advisory side of our business is the mhpexpert.com, and from the transactional brokerage side of things, you can go to estersonmhcteam.com, and all of our contact information is on there. You can give us a call, shoot us an email, send us a text. We answer all our stuff. Maybe not within the minute, but usually within 24 hours we're back to you.
Okay, great. Well, great, Glenn. It was nice to talk to you again today, as always. We'll be speaking next week for another show, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely.
Take care, guys, and thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.